Hello, my name is Chris Packham. I'm a naturalist, a broadcaster and environmental campaigner, and I'm also an autistic person, and I've been asked to speak to you about my experiences recently when I attended court for the processes that played out there. So I was the claimant in a case, not the defendant, I hasten to add, although those tables may be turned because I'm also a climate activist, and given the way the laws are going at the moment, I don't suppose it will be too long before the boot is on the other foot, as it were. However, let's not worry about that. How was my experience down to my neurodiversity? I suppose there's always an element of anxiety, whether you are on the right or the wrong side of the law, and you know that you're going somewhere where you hope that justice will be served. Now, I think there's something that I need to address there. Sometimes upholding the law doesn't necessarily serve justice. And if there's one of the traits that I have which, where there is a commonality with people like myself, with people that have my sort of autism, and that is that we are sometimes motivated by an aggravated dislike of injustice. Probably why I'm an activist, why I campaign for things, where I see necessary change, where I see wrongdoing, where I see laws which are in place not being upheld. I'm not a do-gooder, as my father would have described a certain section of society, but if there are laws and those there are there to protect, in my case, the environment and its wildlife, then I do want to see them upheld. So we go to court seeking not only for the laws to be upheld, but also for justice to be done. Now, therefore, if things are done by the letter of the law, but justice is not served, then we're not going to be satisfied, basically. The environment, I think, is bound to be initially intimidating because it's unusual. We obviously, unless we are working in the legal business, don't frequently attend court. So we are going to a place which is potentially intimidating, because it's a process that we don't fully understand. We can have it previously explained to us, and I did spend quite a lot of time communicating with my lawyers, asking them in a rather childlike way what was going to happen, who was going to have to do what when, what the series of events would be and how would they play out. Down to the extent that I wanted to know where I needed to sit. Would I have to sit in the front? Would I have to sit alongside them? Would I sit behind them? And in fact, knowing very simple things like that can bring quite a lot of comfort, because it then becomes predictable. And I think that one of the things that allows us to reduce our anxiety is being in control of our environment, temporally, emotionally, sometimes creatively, but almost certainly physically. So having a sort of a foretaste of what that environment is going to be, having that explained in quite explicit terms about where you would have to go and what you would have to do when, and where you'd have to sit and who'd say what, and so on and so forth. All of those protocols, which would seem every day to people who regularly attend court, having that laid out was really useful. We then attended a courtroom which was, I'd say, relatively austere, but nevertheless a terrible cluttered jumble. I mean, I'm afraid to say it was untidy. Now, I can push that to one side. It's not my room. I didn't need to get up with a duster and start tidying the place up. But what the visual complexity of that untidiness was challenging for a while. So for the first few hours, I'm looking around everywhere, noting all of this stuff and trying to order it in my mind, so I understand completely visually that environment. And it was a complex environment, austere, old-fashioned courtroom, lots of hanging chandeliers, some with bulbs that were working, some with bulbs that weren't, lots of books on shelves, spines not matching, books that have been put in upside down, books not on the shelf but on the floor. I mean, it was a very cluttered environment. And I'm not casting any aspersions to those that are responsible for looking after that room. It's obviously a place of business, and that's the way the business works. What I'm saying is that from my point of view, it was visually challenging, and it took me a little while, and we were there for days, to settle into that environment. On another note, it was very difficult to hear. So there were suspended microphones, but they didn't seem to amplify the voices of the barristers at all. I had no difficulty hearing the judge, who had a microphone very much closer to his face, and everything that he said came through with perfect clarity. Indeed, those giving evidence was the same. But because we were sat behind the barristers who were facing the judge, at times, well, it wasn't just myself, but a number of people were struggling to hear. And of course, that's, whether you're neurodiverse or not, it's just really frustrating. You've got to be able to hear that stuff. So I think giving consideration to, and we're not talking needing hearing loop type hearing problems here. We're talking fundamentally the acoustics of the building were not suitable, and if those voices weren't properly amplified, and speakers weren't in the right place. So I think that really sort of concludes my piece. I think understanding the physical environment, understanding the necessary protocols, understanding how the system, that court system, works practically, is something that could be looked at. All of this could be addressed in advance through, perhaps videos. I mean, it would have been nice to have seen perhaps images of that courtroom. I'd obviously never been in there before until I turned up on day one, so that would be very easily done, and it would be, the basic little video saying this is what will happen, this is what you'll need to do, this is what you need to say, this is where you need to sit, all of those sorts of things. I know it's sounded really simple, actually. I don't know if this is going to be of any use to you whatsoever, but it's all about, for me, being able to control that my environment to an extent that I can focus on the real job at hand, which was attending the court, giving evidence, understanding the processes, and so on and so forth. If I'm doing two jobs, if I'm managing my autism and doing that, then it can become, tiring, and it can also be counterproductive because I'm not really focusing on what I need to focus on, which was actually addressing the case in hand, not the case in part, which could be in part my autism. I hope that's been of some use to you.
As things developed, you could see things evolving, and by the time I was involved in those cases, the way in which people asked questions had changed.